one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to tonight's Planning Board meeting. Please be aware of the fire exit, which is to your left of this room. In the event of an emergency, please move in a calm and orderly fashion down the stairs. Do not use the elevators. The meetings are recorded by the Secretary for the purpose of a record and minutes, so please identify yourself each time you come to the podium and speak in the microphone. The board will follow the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. Extra copies are available near the door. After each case has been called, the applicant and/or the representative shall come to the podium, identify him or herself, give his or her address, and then present their case. The planning board members will then have an opportunity to question the applicant. If the case is in a public hearing, it will be open for public input, at which time anyone wishing to speak to the board regarding this application will come to the podium, identify themselves along with their address, and direct any questions they have to the board. Once all public input has been completed, the applicant or site representative shall be given an opportunity to respond to the public input. Once all public input has been completed and all questions have been satisfied, the case will be closed to public input and the board will then move on to a decision. No further input is allowed at this point.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is case number PB 1603-3. Upon the matter of request by Land Tech Surveying and Planning, acting as agent for Lighthouse Point Property Associates for preliminary final site plan approval, Woodlot Environmental Protection Overlay District EPOD permit, and floodplain EPOD permit to construct a 135-unit multifamily apartment development comprised of two 4-story, 54 multifamily apartment buildings, unit buildings with ground level parking, and 327 multifamily apartment unit building, a 2-story clubhouse with pool and site-related improvements on premises 951 and 1027 Thomas Avenue and 45 Pattonwood Drive in an RH River Harbor district.
Thank you. So I'd like to reopen the public hearing on this matter, and I'd like to start by inviting our town engineer to come forward.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Greg Senecal with Labella,
Thank you, Greg.
and I can give you a brief presentation about the brownfield cleanup process that the applicant desires to do. I understand that at this time they're only seeking approval for the south portion of the development site, that being the acreage south of the O'Rourke Bridge. And I can also answer any questions that you may have regarding the brownfield cleanup program. But the applicant is enrolled in the New York State DEC brownfield cleanup program. There are two ways to enroll into that program. One is a participant in the program, which a party that's responsible for any contamination at a site can only enroll as a participant. The applicant isn't responsible, didn't cause any of the contamination, so they're enrolled as a volunteer. And that means that they're responsible to deal with any contamination or exceedances of chemicals of concern that they find within the confines of the property. Anything outside of that, of the property line itself, what's enrolled in the program, becomes the responsibility of the state. However, as the volunteer, they're required to pay for New York State DEC and New York State DOH oversight costs. The applicant submits a number of plans, from investigations to site characterizations, then on to remedial alternatives reports, remedial work plans, and finally construction completion, corrective action oversight reports to both the New York State DEC and the New York State DOH, who approve all of the measures that they may undertake at the site. It's my understanding, well, it isn't, the New York State DEC Brownfield Cleanup Program has a 4-track cleanup approach. The most restrictive, requiring the most cleanup, is for residential use. The next most restrictive is restricted residential. That applies to multi-unit housing, such as the applicant is proposing, and that's the category that they are in. With each cleanup track, as you go up, it goes all the way up to industrial. The cleanup gets less and less restrictive. So I made a quick sheet. I understand that the planning board may have questions regarding the levels of cleanup, and I made a quick little handout that shows the 4-track cleanup criteria going from residential to restricted residential to commercial and then industrial. And it just shows the cleanup for a common contaminant, benzene, in soil, and how the cleanup becomes more restrictive as you go toward single-family residential and less restrictive as you go up towards industrial. But restricted residential is appropriate. It's meant for multifamily housing, typically restricts in the easements and engineering controls things such as flower beds, vegetable gardens, things of that nature, which you wouldn't find at a managed apartment townhouse type complex. Beyond that, there isn't what I would consider a lot of contamination at the south parcel. Most of it is old railroad base fill, cinders, slag, typical urban fill, which does contain levels of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. Those are considered to be a semi-volatile petroleum compound, but not a liquid petroleum compound that would be associated with motor fuels, diesel, gasoline, etc. They're actually partially combusted long-chain petroleum hydrocarbons, typical with coal ash, cinders, road base, asphalt, slag, things of that nature. They're not volatile, meaning that the chemical compounds are bound into the soil. They don't try to go from a solid state to a vapor state. So it's actually fairly simple cleanup measures and engineering controls, which are typically consists of covering that material, excavating out obviously what you have to get your project in, but covering that material with 2 feet of clean cover to prevent exposure. And basically that's it in a nutshell. The volunteer agrees to do whatever cleanup the DEC and DOH requires. They agree to provide engineering controls as required by the brownfield cleanup process. And those engineering controls can range from anything from open air ventilation and anything that goes subgrade, any structure that goes subgrade, to passive vapor mitigation under buildings, even to active vapor mitigation under buildings. From reviewing the environmental reports, I don't see much in the way of volatiles on this property with the sampling that's been, conducted to date. However, they'll be required by the DEC, and the DEC typically provides an on-site engineer for construction oversight, to clean up anything that they may find during construction, and mitigate it if they find it. And
Thank you.
that's about it, but I'm happy to answer any questions
I'd
that
like
you
to
may have.
have that opportunity if the board has any questions. So I'll start with Bernie. Do you have any questions?
Sure. I sort of have a simple question. I know we can only talk to the site that the applicant is talking to remediate. However, this site is right on top of a portion that can't be remediated because it's city property. Is there any danger to the residents living that close to a brownfield that's not remediated that would require the board to look at putting some type of cautions there for the residents? And the only reason I ask is there's no residents there now. However, there will be a lot of residents, and it's going to be right on top of a portion of brownfield that won't be remediated. So I don't know if that's appropriate to ask, but I just thought.
Can I just clarify though?
Go ahead.
Sure.
The city property along the river is,
Oh, yeah, Alan, the mic.
And I identify myself too.
And tell everyone who you are.
Hello. Okay. I'm Alan Knopf, attorney for the applicant. We actually, the present plan is we would remediate the city property along the river to the west, even though there's not a present development plan for that property. Because it's all, both the site that is currently under review by the planning board in the town of Arundequite is approximately half of the riverfront site. The other half is in the city. So we would remediate the entire, either we would remediate the entire site, or if the city does not give us permission to remediate their site, then we couldn't, and then we would have to ask the DEC to remove it from the riverfront site. But if it as it stands right now, the plan is to remediate the entire riverfront site. The only reason we wouldn't do it is if the city didn't let us.
So do you have permission now to do that?
No, they gave us permission to apply into the program. They gave us permission to test. We've requested permission. We've, as we told you before, we requested that we would like to purchase the property, but we do not have any commitment right now from the city. They've asked for more and more information, so we do not have any commitment on that. I'm optimistic that they will allow that, but I can't tell you that we have a commitment. So if we didn't get that commitment, then we would just go ahead in the Arundequite parcel and have to ask the DEC to change the site boundary.
Okay, so I guess that doesn't answer my question then.
I'm not quite sure that I understood your question either.
Okay.
If your question is the applicant going to clean up property they don't currently own?
No. My question was, we're now putting a large residence on a brownfield, but everything I read and everything I thought we discussed up to this point in time was we could only discuss what the applicant is remediating. So my question was, the part that's not getting remediated, is there any danger to the residents that cautions have to be made if that's not remediated? We just talked about all the things they're doing to make it safe, but if they can't touch the city property, what's making that safe for the people that are living there?
That's an excellent question. If there is a privately held property immediately adjacent to the property that they're working on, or a piece owned by the city, and that piece is contaminated, there is the possibility of migration onto the site. However, as the applicant would probably point out, I believe any areas of contamination south of the bridge that we're talking about have most likely been contaminated by the same source for many, many years. It isn't like there's an active gas station or an oil refinery that's right there on property owned by a different party. So there is data, a lot of data has been gathered by the applicant's consultant doing sampling and testing on this piece of property. If there was some huge source of contamination right over the property boundary, you'd already see it. It's been there for many years. It's reached a state of equilibrium. Furthermore, as I think through your question, groundwater flow in this area is all obviously going towards the river. So any contaminant in between your property, the Genesee River that might be on city property, would be flowing into the Genesee River, not back away from the river. And I know I'm not answering your question perfectly. I don't know that there is an answer for your question.
Well, maybe I can ask it a different way. So
Okay.
you're representing the town engineer.
That's correct.
So if you're representing the town, and if this applicant is not able to get permission, it sounds like they want to do the right thing. It definitely sounds that way from what Mr. Knopf said. As the town engineer, would you make it conditional that they would have to get that permission? Because there could be danger to the residents, or not? That's kind of what I'm looking for.
That's a hard question to answer.
I didn't, yeah.
And what I would offer is that I can go back to my office, re-examine all of the documents, figure out exactly where this property line is, and compare any known contaminants on the brownfield side of the property line as it relates to any known contaminants on the opposite side of the property line. Look at it from a contaminant-specific migration trend. In other words, if there's only PAHs and levels of heavy metals on this documented on the city side, I think my answer would be that there would be no danger from leaving that strip of land that the city owns unremediated or uncovered. However, if I go back and find out that there are solvents or highly volatile liquid petroleum products on that property, I'd give you a different answer.
Okay. One more question?
Go ahead.
So I was reading all the documentation that they put together, and it was very detailed, but there was one comment made about nobody living on the brownfield site. And I just wanted to clarify, does the current owner have a house on the brownfield site, or is their home outside of the brownfield site? Because you referred to it as the Riverno or Riverfront District. I don't have my notes in front of me.
Yeah, Mr. Gilbert.
Sorry, you got to take the mic.
Mr. Gilbert does live north of the bridge in a house that's on the inland site. So he's on a brownfield site, but not this one. So
So
the answer is, so no one is living on the brownfield site.
So no one's living on a brownfield site?
On this brownfield
On this
site.
brownfield site that's part of this project?
Correct.
Okay, that's just the clarification, because I
Right.
read that and I thought it kind of stuck out to me that I thought
Yeah,
somebody...
one of the earlier study, the earlier version of the remedial investigation from December 2014 covered both sites. So it would have, it might well, I don't remember, but may well have mentioned that he lived on the one site. And we changed the boundary of the riverfront site also was changed. So at one point he did live on the riverfront site, but the boundary was changed so the riverfront site is only south of the bridge. At an earlier time, the riverfront property, the riverfront brownfield site included some land north of the bridge, and I believe it included his house.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay. Quick question, maybe for you or Alan. Would any of these concerns that Bernie brings up be thought about or written into that site management plan?
I'm thinking back to one that I recently did with an off-site contamination source. Yes, the DEC, as they go through all of the documents the applicant has, again, if there is known contamination there, and there is a documented source of contamination, the DEC would put it into the site management plan, and then it would become the DEC's responsibility to address it. Because the applicant's a volunteer, anything off of their property line, they are only required to identify to the state. They need to predict whether any of their contamination is going off-site, but not vice versa. They do not need to and are not required to go off looking for other sources of contamination. And I've worked in my capacity for the town as well as for the city on both sides of the river for many years. I wasn't aware until you asked that question that there's a contaminated strip that would be along that strip of land where all the sheds where the people keep their boating supplies. I wasn't, is there documentation that exists, or is it an assumption?
No.
I don't know.
That portion of the property that's outside the town of Arundequoit is located within the BCP boundary known as the riverfront site. So the applicant is only proposing to develop half of the currently proposing to the town of Arundequoit to develop half of what is included in that larger boundary.
Okay, I'm really sorry. That was going to be my first question back to you because I didn't fully understand your question. But Carrie brings up a point. If the applicant has enrolled that piece of property and it's part of the BCP boundary to the New York State DEC, they will be required to investigate it and clean it up if it's necessary. What's confusing me is it sounds like Carrie just stated that the applicant has enrolled that portion of the site into the brownfield program, yet I then have a question how the applicant would roll it into the program, enter it into the program, and get DEC approval if the applicant doesn't own it at this time. Because it sounds like from your question, it's still owned by the city of Rochester.
And the city gave us permission to do that, and we'd been in discussions for many years where the city indicated that they would entertain, that they were amenable to selling the property. Of course, that was a couple mayors ago, but so we don't have a binding contract, but we have talked to them. They agreed to let us enroll it in the program. They agreed to let us do the testing for the program. So everything, we've gotten all the permissions we needed to date from the city to go forward on the brownfield plan. By the same token, we don't own this piece of property either. But we are under contract with Mr. Gilbert to purchase it, as opposed to the city property. We are not under any contract.
But you're still in conversations with the city?
We're still in, yes.
And if the planning board would like, I can certainly talk to the city and the DEC and get you a better answer. Now the question's becoming much more clear once Carrie brought that up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You all set, Bernie? Oh, sorry, we have a couple more
Sorry,
questions
Greg,
for you.
sorry.
I just want to get away from this mic
I don't
as
blame you
quickly as
after
I
that
can.
Bernie just caused you a headache.
usually don't ask.
Once the cleanup is done, is there any follow-up to make sure that there's no more contaminants coming through DEC's part? Or is that going to be part of the site management plan?
Yes, typically the site management plan requires a yearly, I believe it's a yearly certification from the volunteer that the engineering controls, whatever they end up being, are intact and functional. So if the engineering control here ends up being, and the remedy that's selected for the site and approved by the DEC ends up being 2 feet of clean cover, it would require a statement, I believe on a yearly basis, from the volunteer and an engineer's inspection that 2 foot of clean cover remains intact. That none of it's eroded, hasn't washed away, anything of that nature. If it ends up that a vapor mitigation system is required, that also requires a yearly certification and warranty that the fans are working, that it's operating as it should.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, Alan? Richard?
It's probably more directed to Mr. Knopf, but based upon Mr. Blacky's question, we've been repeatedly advised that this is a cleanup, this is an improvement to the land, and so my question would be, if you can get the city to allow you to clean up the strip between your property and the river, and as the DEC would want you to do if it's a cleanup, what's the proposal? What would you be doing to remediate it? Would it be a 2-foot cap or some other plan?
Yeah, it's the same remedy, the 2-foot cap. That's the remedial alternatives analysis that you have in front of you covers the entire riverfront site, both in the city and in the town. So it's a 2-foot cap except where there would be parking lots or building slabs. So it's basically, there's a barrier to the subsurface where the contamination is.
So your goal, as well as the DEC's goal, if the city allows you to do it, would be not only to remediate the property you own, but remediate the property the city currently owns.
That's correct.
Thank you. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite the applicant to share some new information.
Thank you. Are you Madam Chair?
I guess, yeah?
We did, there were a number of loose ends that we have followed up on, so I wanted to give you an idea as to where we're at. We did submit late Friday a supplemental seeker documentation, which I know no one's had time to read, but I think you do have it in front of you. I'll just briefly go over a number of issues. One is we at the workshop, Ms. Ivers brought up that there was a letter from the city, and we did review that. And basically, the city's concern was, that they would be an involved agency due to us having to put, basically one of our options is to put a pipe for discharge of stormwater across the city property to the Genesee River. Right now, the stormwater, as you would guess, naturally flows into the Genesee River. There's a couple of options we have for that. One is to put additional underground storage and connect to the city, or excuse me, connect to the town's existing pipe. The town has a very large pipe that goes through here. How big is it, John?
7.
It's a 6-foot diameter pipe. It's very large. We could hook into that pipe. I think we would need approval of, I'm not sure if it's the town board or the commissioner of public works. I think
Town board.
Carrie was checking. Okay. So we would need somebody's permission to do that. The other alternative would be to run a separate pipe where we wouldn't have to do as much underground storage. And there we would probably need permission from both the town and the city to do that. So the city said, so they were notified as being a lead agency, or excuse me, being an involved agency. They gave a letter saying that it's not just the city, the mayor and the city council would be separate involved agencies, which I didn't necessarily see the distinction between the city and various decision makers in the city being separate agencies, but we're fine with that if they want to be separate involved agencies. We don't have any objection to that. I understand also that maybe the town board wasn't notified of being an involved agency. We had put on here that originally that there was a possibility of a zoning amendment. We didn't really anticipate that. That's sort of an alternative. But in any event, so I guess those agencies have to be notified. Again, the city asked for a revised environmental assessment form that included this, so we submitted a revised environmental assessment form. The other couple issues they questioned was kind of what we were just talking about, that we would need their permission and to remediate their property, and which we well know because we've been talking to them about that for a long time. And while I do note that the remedy under the Brownfield Cleanup Program is actually exempt from seeker, so to some extent, for purposes of seeker, none of these are relevant. We understand everybody's concerned about the issues, so we're still submitting the information and talking about it. But basically, what I told you before is our intent is we would like to purchase the property from the city and clean it up, but if the city doesn't want to sell, we want to develop in Arundequite, and we would have to go back to the DEC and ask them to remap the site and draw the line in a different location. And then it's the city's problem to clean up their property if they didn't want to participate. The other issue the city raised was whether the environmental assessment should also include the possibility that we would develop in the city. It was a little surprising to me since we submitted an environmental assessment last October that included development in the city, and they said they didn't really want to review it because it was too preliminary. But be that as it may, we submitted a third version of the environmental assessment form that also included the possibility of development in the city. So basically, our project is only in the town of Arundequite, as we've been acknowledging from day one. We would like to go into the city, but we don't have any contract. But what we have done is revise this to say our project is in Arundequite. There is the possibility that we could go into the city and there would be more units. Our traffic study covers that. It covers 260 units. So in the two main issues that you would deal with would be that and the brownfield, and those are already covered in our study. So sort of to cover either alternative, I thought the board could go ahead only looking at the town of Arundequite development because it's a self-contained development. But we included that possibility, so we're really covering the bases. And we're looking at any cumulative impact in the city by our traffic study, which includes 260 units and some waterfront restaurant or clubhouse and all that. That's all in there. So we really cover the maximum development, sort of the worst, or not the worst, but the highest development possibility. The largest traffic flow is covered. So that's the reason for that submission. We also gave you a revised site plan, which where we cut back on parking in line with our last discussion. So we're just meeting the town requirements and don't have excess parking in the town. So that allows us to have more, less pavement and more either green space or permeable. We did, and I gave this to you last meeting, but we included another copy of the remedial alternatives report that was submitted to the DEC that covers the fact that we're going to put 2 feet of cover across the whole riverfront site or pavement or building slab. And the environmental easement and restrictions and things like if we dug and found something like what we call putrescible waste or something that looks like a problem, we would remove that. If it's just concrete or something, then we probably could bury that on site if it's not a problematic waste. Tab C in the submission, the DEC had asked that we revise the remedial investigation report so it only covered the riverfront site, so we did that. The previous version covered both the riverfront and the DEC had originally requested we do one report for both the riverfront and inland site, and they had a few comments, and one of them was that we separate out the riverfront site, so we did that. Tab D, there was some comments from Monroe County DOT that we have addressed now in a revised traffic study. The main thing was to consider, there were a few issues, but the main issue was to consider the possibility that the city's port project would go forward, to make sure that was in the background study. So they wanted to see the cumulative impact of both having the port project and our project. So we did that, and they didn't come to any different conclusion. They had already had some growth factor in anyways. In other words, when they do their traffic study, they assume a certain growth rate. They added in the port project, and they still come to the same conclusions that it's not going to have any big impact on us, and that this is not going to cause any traffic problems, basically. So that's included, and again, that covers not only this project, but if we were going to extend into the city, or somebody else was going to, we're covered as far as basically full development of the site. So those are the additional submissions. Now we do have some more. I guess John Sharaba from Land Tech can present the revisions to the site plan.
Excuse me, in the interim of that, I just wanted to clarify for this board that the town board was identified as an interested agency back in March or April when it was circulated initially. But because of the potential for licensure, now they would be an involved agency. So we would just want to have the town board revisit that.
Thank you, Carrie.
Good evening, everyone. John Sharaba with Land Tech. And I really don't have much to add. Just wanted to kind of go over a couple topics. I did pass out a little handout to you, just pointing the highlights from the last meeting. As Alan said, we reduced the number of units down to 125. And we also are compliant in our parking spots, which we reduced it by 52 spots. That's a 18% reduction in what we're proposing. And a lot of those spots were along our south property line. We were able to achieve getting a little more green space in there. So we took out 16 spots along that, both along the south of the big building and south of the smaller building. It was also an issue that the town engineer brought up about porous pavers in the drive aisles. So we were able to, with that reduction, remove those out of the drive aisles. So any porous pavers would be in the parking stalls at that point. And then we did remove the parking from underneath the smaller building. So there was no parking underneath that smaller building. In conjunction with that smaller building change, there is now an 8,000 square foot space for commercial retail operation in line with our River Harbor zoning district. It was noted that we weren't fully compliant with that with our previous plan, so now we have some diversity. And we also added a connection sidewalk to Thomas Avenue to bring people into that building. As I mentioned, we did have some new green space opportunities, and for that we have Heinrich Fisher here, who prepared a detailed landscaping plan that you don't have. It is done, and he'll go over that in a few moments. But just one question I just make sure that you understand. Is everyone comfortable with the answer regarding this big 6-foot diameter pipe? Does everyone understand why we keep going back to this? Everyone comfortable? You want me to explain it in more detail?
We're a little more comfortable, but we might have some questions moving forward. I know
Okay.
I was concerned about looking into the future. We think about a 50-year rain event or a 100-year rain event. Well, those aren't 50 and 100 years anymore. Those are whenever the skies open up and it happens. So have you gotten any information? Have you looked at some of that?
Well, so take a step back and explain why we're even talking about this issue. Is there's a 6-foot concrete pipe that runs north and adjacent to the railroad property, and I think a large portion of Arundecoit drains down to that. I think it collects, obviously, Thomas Avenue, Eaton, and all that water. Our application, since we are disturbing more than an acre, we have to meet the green practices for the DEC permit. So when you do that, you have two things you have to accomplish. You have water quality and water volume. And we said, oh, great, we're down here by the river. We just have to go into the Genesee River, which is an identified tributary that we only have to worry about water quality. So we designed an underground stormwater system, and then we drained that into that 6-foot diameter pipe. It was sized accordingly for all the storms that you mentioned. But there's this little caveat in the code that says, hey, once you connect to a public pipe or any pipe prior to going to that tributary for discharge, you have to handle water volume. So now the size of our storm system underground just exploded. So we said, well, let's go to the city and ask for an easement. And that's where this conversation came up. So we can do it underground, both capacities, both for water quality and volume. Flooding, I don't feel is an issue. We are down at the lowest point. Our site is above the floodplain. Our garage are above that. So even if they flooded across the land, it would not be an issue for any of the structures. We're not proposing to pay flood insurance on this building. So it's kind of why all this pipe stuff comes up. So we still probably will pursue, there is a town easement that goes through the city. That easement is 30 foot wide, and the pipe is only 6. So there's room in there with work with the DPW and the town on that if we decide to pursue that. And the most critical point is the 30 foot adjacent to Genesee River. That's the part that's triggering our issue with that. And that is solely because of the public works document, I forgot the public trust document that the city cannot sell that portion. So that's where we are on the pipe. But that's all I really have, unless you have any other questions for me.
John, when will a determination be made as to whether you're going to pursue a license from the town or an easement from the city?
Probably pending seeker and how we move next on the site plan. It's really it's turning into an economic decision on our end. Trying to go through the process, see if the site plan stands as it is. If the green space works and the buffering works, we can start implementing the underground, so I can get a better analysis of the cost. It is substantial, and then I guess my client will have to make that determination. We're hoping to have a better working relationship with the city, right, Alan, going forward.
Yeah. And then I guess the other thing is we would have to look at, and maybe you could look at or maybe be to the town board's attorney as far as the terms of the town's easement over the city property, because I'm not actually sure what if that allows a second pipe to be run or what the terms are.
Yeah, and that's sort of the concern I'm getting at. I'm trying to determine whether or not it's actually feasible to locate within that city easement that's in favor of the town.
I don't have the labyrinth page of that easement with me tonight, but it is filed, so there is a document that we can review.
But I mean, if worse came to, we have two options. The one option we know we can do. I mean, we can do additional underground storage and hook into the town's system like everybody else in the town. So that is doable. It's just that is going to be a lot more expensive.
Thank you.
Or Heinrich? Yeah. Okay, we're going to, Andrew Hintonek, our architect, is going to come up now and show you some of the additional drawings that we've done.
You want to ask questions in between or when they're done?
I got one question.
Oh, can we? Sure.
Oh, wait, please. Look. For that page you just took down, John,
Sorry, John.
For-
Sounds like instead of waiting for everybody, we might have some questions in between.
for the one you just took down, this is the one we got a copy of, right?
Correct,
Does
correct.
this represent the new parking?
Yes.
Okay, and it's been reduced by how many?
52, I might know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? John, why don't you hang on a second in case anyone else has any questions before we get too far ahead? Is there anything else you're thinking?
That was it.
Alan?
Thank you.
Okay.
Did we talk about 70 extra last time?
Yes, we did.
I might have stated that. I think after the analysis, it was 50. Because
Okay,
that's
so 52 now is the new number.
52 is the reduction for a total of 232. And if you look at the, I know it's small, but there is a parking schedule on that sheet I provided. You can go through each item. That includes the commercial change as well. So, and we kind of went on the high end, kind of conservative number on that.
And we did email over to Carrie today electronic version, so hopefully if you could forward the link, everybody on the board could look at electronic versions of the submission, including the site plan. She just got it today.
Yeah, and we'll have to, our process internally is to stamp them in as received, and then Michelle's got to rescan them
Right.
and circulate them. So as soon as we can get those to you, we certainly will be doing that. Alan, don't make a face, that we have a process, and we have to just make sure that that's our process for stamping them in as date received, so we can document.
Couldn't you just do the first page to rescan?
We're hoping, yeah, so we've just got to work within our own process.
And then I just had one other question. I don't see really a sidewalk plan on here.
It's a small sidewalk that runs, I don't have my plan up, but if you look at the northeast corner of the smaller building, and there's a little faint line that runs towards Thomas Avenue.
Okay, and
Okay.
is there any connection with the other parts of the community through
Not at this
sidewalks?
time. We had some discussion at the last meeting about, do we really want to connect everything into this facility as far as pedestrians and things like that? So if there's changes that you see are warranted beyond that, one sidewalk, we can,
Because I think one of the issues is that the community become part of itself.
correct.
So this is becoming a little bit isolated, and I know
We-
that we talked about that.
Our original plan was to do that, and then I think at the last meeting, the chair had suggested that we not do that. So, I mean, we're good either way. If the board wants to have a connection all the way through to the back with a sidewalk, we're happy to do that. If the board thinks that's not a good idea, we don't have to do that. We originally had proposed that, but then there were some concerns about it.
I'm just thinking because it's a two-way street here, both the residents at this complex as well as the residents that live to the south of it, and potentially to the north of it would want to have some interaction, and that would be the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be happy to do that.
Mr. Richards, can I just remind you to speak in your microphone for us,
sorry.
please? Thank you.
I apologize. Thank
Yep.
you. I'm
Anything
done.
else?
No.
So, well, I got a couple questions.
Back to Bernie, hang on.
So, and I'm not sure if it's you, John, or Alan, you mentioned you could be potentially getting permission from the city to kind of go back to your original submission. Is that what I understood?
So there's an existing easement that runs through the town of Runnicquay along the railroad tracks, and then
I don't think that's his question. No, that's not his question. The the city's letter consenting or not consenting, whatever, in response to the request to consent for lead agency, the city said, we know there's a possibility that you would build in the city, which we've told you from day one. But we designed this as a self-contained project in the town of Arundequoit because we don't have permission from the city to purchase their property. The city's letter seemed to say that you should also consider, basically whether you consider it the cumulative impact or however you want to put it, that you should consider the possibility of future development in the city. So what we have done is gave you both scenarios. You know, we gave you the numbers for only in the town, and then we put like in parentheses and some of the things, and you know, if we went in the city, it would be this many units. The traffic study already covers it. So we are already hitting the max on the traffic study. And obviously the brownfield cleanup covers both of them. So, but that's why the city had said, we really want you to look at both. So we said, fine. In fact, that's what we originally did back in October. And at the time, they didn't want to look at it. So now we're doing it, which is basically what we gave them back in October.
For clarification, and just so everybody has the same information, the city of Rochester declined to review the seeker document until there was a formal application before them, and they weren't at that point yet. So just so everybody understands the context, they did provide the document, but there was no application that triggered their review of it for the city of Rochester.
At this time. So, go ahead, Bernie.
I was going to ask, do we have a copy of all that correspondence? Because I don't recall seeing that. Maybe I missed it because we got a lot.
And this would have dated back a while ago at the onset of the project. It might have come from Zena, the city of Rochester's director of zoning, planning and zoning. I don't know if,
Might not
I
have
actually
gotten it.
I never got a letter from her. You may have. I never saw a letter, back in October, I'm saying. Last year, I never saw a letter where she declined. I just called her and said, what's going on? And she said they weren't going to act on it.
she might have just shared that information with me as a staff person.
So these more recent comments that you were making, the city made, did we get a copy of
Yeah,
those?
we did.
Yes,
Yes.
that was in writing.
That's in their lead agency response in the packet on lead
Yeah,
agency.
there's
Just wanted to make sure
there's
it was
been a lot.
So we were responding to their concerns. So basically, we're covering all the bases.
This is the response, right? The new
Y-
information?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I have a
Just wanted to make sure.
quick question. All right, go ahead. One more.
I apologize with the one more. The only reason I asked about if you could be potentially going back to what you originally proposed, would that change the density of what you're currently doing, potentially, or it would have no impact?
No, it wouldn't have any impact.
Okay, so it would just be more,
It would be more on additional twice as much acreage, so,
okay.
you know. And basically, as we indicate, the zoning in the city is similar.
Thank you.
You're
I
good?
promise this time.
Sorry, it's all good. Just wanted to retouch on the pedestrian access to the area. So perhaps, since it sounds like the previous chair gave you a little different direction and we're doing
Right.
some other things tonight, perhaps you could consider some pedestrian access on your current plan that would also allow for future development, so that you weren't looking at it twice.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do that. It just,
I know, it's all good. Okay.
so we'll do that.
Okay. Are you all set, Alan?
I am.
Don't run away. I'm sorry, Richard.
All set.
Okay. All right, we will now call on Mr. Hintank.
Hi, Andrew Hintonock, architect representing the applicant on the project. In our workshop, we talked about a little bit different architecture, and we gave you some basic line drawings, and this is the actual model now with materials and superimposed on the site. And we also did bring some materials to review because on the bottom
Can I ask you to come a little closer to the mic? I'm sorry. Thank you.
On the okay. In the first floor, we're looking at doing a half height of the first floor, which would be the stone that's down here. I don't know if everybody can see that.
Nope.
You want to be my model? It's heavy. You get your exercise, because it is actually natural stone. That goes along the bottom half of the building. On the main body of the building, we'll call it, is we're showing it as a sage green, which is just a vinyl siding, heavy-duty, overscaled siding. Is that the actual board-on-board size of the siding that we're looking at? And of course, above that, we'll do a white trim and a beige or light brown color, as you can see. And in the gable ends, we don't actually show some of these accoutrements, but we have to have some of these vents for sure in the gable ends, and that's just to give you an idea of what that would look like. And also up in the gables that are above the roof line, the eave, the gutter line, we're going to use this product, which is a shake, to give it some texture. Roof is just a brown architectural shingle, and that both, well, I guess I could talk about, that's the front of the building, and in the rear of the building, well, we call it the rear, it's facing the river. Some people might call that the front. Very similar treatment across the bottom. Same type of deal going on with our shingles in the gables. And in this area here, we talked about doing some relief. I did some relief, but somehow it didn't end up on the model here. But this, right in this area where these windows are vertical, down the middle, that is a corridor, and it'll be about 6 feet wide and about 2 feet deep in that area, where it just shows flush right now.
Yep.
So we're definitely trying to get a shadow line in there as well.
Okay.
Along where the parking garage is, we've talked about this in several different ways on how to do this. And looking at the bridge used a formed concrete, we call it, for lack of a better word, mold, to give the texture of the stone and the arches. We'd like to apply that similar feature along our bottom, with the oversized kind of form for stone, and then of course some type of relief around the actual vent openings. We do have grates in there that you can see, and we also have 2 sets of stairs heading up to the patio level where the pool is. So that's, and unlike the bridge with the texture, we like the texture, but we're going to add a little color to that so that it's not just concrete gray. So it'd be a warm brown most likely, and we might actually be able to add some different colors to help accentuate it. Oh, the window? Yeah, here's one of our, this is a sample of the window. It's not the exact window, but very similar. I know Peter talked about some muttons. So in the model, we have shown that we do the upper half of the glazing with a 6/, well, it's a 3/3 really, it's just a 6-panel window inside the glazing. Similar to that, but actually just up in here.
And is that just in the top level, or is that throughout?
No, the top, just the top part, top half of the window. On all floors. Yeah, you can see it in there.
How about in the doors that lead out to the patios? Are there going to be louvers in those doors or not?
I hadn't anticipated it in doors, just in windows.
Okay.
And a lot of the, some of the commercial glass, which isn't necessarily facing, say, Thomas or whatever, we still have to work out exactly how that framing will look. exactly how many windows will be in this area. It's more of an aluminum frame type of window system, and that'll be a little different.
Front building going to have the same general design with the stone on the bottom?
Yes, it is. Can't quite see it but you can. You get a little glimpse of it here.
What's the material that the balconies are made out of?
Well, the balconies are most likely going to be some type of metal and wood combination, and we will cover them with it's either going to be a metal finish, so there's no maintenance finish, or we'll be using quite a bit of this type of trim, which is an AZAC, and we can get it to fit, and you can paint it too, so more non-maintaining type of things that won't have a problem in the future. It'll maintain its look as long as it's clean.
And are the balconies in an accent color or a blended color?
They're a color that's similar to the roof, a little bit of an accent, a little bit of a darker brown compared to the siding. So they do have a little bit of subtle color change. And as it fits within talk about the Harbor District, again, I didn't show shutters, but gable roof, siding, we've hit most of the characteristics of that type of development required.
Yeah, I just don't think shutters would make it.
Yeah, there's too many
Would
windows.
be cluttered,
I think.
yeah.
That's why I propose a nice trim around them. That's why it was next to the window here. Any other questions?
Gentlemen, any questions at this point?
No, thank you for bringing the materials. It
Yes.
helps.
Well,
No,
None?
I just appreciate the applicant's willingness to listen to our advice at the workshop, and we've had you go through a number of different alterations to the building, and at least as of yet, we haven't received any resistance on any of our comments.
Thank you.
ready for Heinrich?
We're ready?
I actually have a question for Mr. Knopf while it's still in my...
Go right ahead.
We were here, I don't know, a year ago where there was discussion about the Seneca Trail going up through Seneca Park.
Oh,
and
right.
all the way up to Thomas Avenue. In your opinion or your discussions, has any of the city's hesitation to jump on board where there's an opportunity to have somebody else remediate their property have anything to do with that proposed Seneca Trail?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And we have, I think we've indicated to you and to the city that we would like to cooperate and try to make that trail happen, all the way along. So I don't think so. I think it's just more the process with the city is just a little more cumbersome.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
all right. Last, we're going to ask Heinrich Fischer, our landscape architect who was here at the workshop. He's come back with some landscape designs, and he'll present it to you and ask for your...
Do we have copies of any of that or not?
No, but you will. Sorry.
Well, okay.
Heinrich Fischer, registered landscape architect here, and working with the applicant. What I would like to do is go through the comments from our last meeting, and I'll try and go through those quickly and touch bases on all of those and what we have done to date and where we're headed with things. One of the first comments was from Pete. He wanted to know what the retaining walls were made out of. John? It's a precast concrete product, and again, colors have not been chosen yet, but as the architecture comes together in terms of colors, we will submit copies or samples of that so things do blend in. Second suggestion that was also made by another person, Rich Palukas, in terms of suggestion of grasses. I have not addressed that directly. I'm waiting for the final architectural, so I'm knowing what I am doing with foundation type plantings, but we're definitely going to be utilizing grasses, trying to stay as natural with materials as we can. The drawing that is up on the board is basically showing the massing of the different trees, some of the things that we had discussed at the previous meeting. I didn't make many copies, but I've got a complete copy of all of the different major plant materials with information on those plants. I cannot use every plant being native, but about 50% of the plant materials that we're suggesting are considered native. So I'm trying to work with the environment in that direction. Kimmy suggested evergreens that aren't enjoyed by the deer. I'm trying. That's a tough one. I've chosen Norway and white spruce and also the western red cedar. All three plants in the industry are considered deer resistant, but I think we all know what we're working with there. And there's still latitude in changing. There's a possibility of using the Colorado spruce, but I've heard there is a viral disease that's getting into that, and it's in the Rochester area, so I want to find out a little bit more through Cornell Extension as to where we are with that type of plant. So we can make some substitutions there. Kimmy also had a question in regards to want to see vegetation that does not require many pesticides. There isn't any plant we can utilize or plant that may not have some kind of a disease problem, but the majority of these plants, they're not a very heavy use. As long as we keep the plants healthy, I think that's the major goal right there. Asked about the caliper of the trees. As per town codes, shade trees need to be a minimum of 1 3/4 inch caliper. If we go to a parking lot situation, it's 2.5 inch caliper measured. So I have spec'd everything in terms of the shade trees at that 2.5 inch caliper. As far as ornamental trees go, depending on availability, I need to be at least 1.5 inch caliper. I've suggested 1 3/4 to 2 inch caliper. The main reason for that is with the larger plant material, much better branching structure. Immediately, if anything we're doing in terms of a screening, there's just more impact immediately. That was one of the reasons for choosing that. As far as major evergreens go, the spruce, I'm suggesting a 7 to 8 versus a 5 to 6 footer, simply because there's just that much more plant, more body. It's going to give us more immediate impact in terms of screening areas. Where I'm using the western red cedar, I'm suggesting going to a 6 to 7 foot height. I would dearly love to go larger. The client will probably shoot me if I suggest it, but right now availability on that particular plant, because it is deer resistant, is virtually not available. And the 6 to 7 again gives you a very substantial plant. These plants have the capability of growing anywhere from 18 to 24 to 3 feet in a year. So it's a plant that will work very well. Now that we've sort of pinned down the architecture and the color, I can finally do what is needed to be done in terms of foundation plantings. And again, some of the engineering in terms of drainage areas have been somewhat of a concern to myself in terms of having enough soil depth in certain areas, but we've pretty much gotten that fine-tuned at this point, so now it's just a matter of adding the foundation material to it. Mr. Plukas had mentioned something about Cornhill Landing. What was that in reference to? Like, dislike, or?
I don't think that was me, that I recall. We had discussed the cupolas or.
It was more of an architectural thing as opposed to landscape?
Yeah, I don't remember.
remember that.
Because way back when that was developed, I ended up doing the master landscape plan for that entire complex for the DeMarzos. Then there was a question asked about the legality of screening efforts that might be removed later. That again, if the property to the east were purchased, that would be addressed at that point in time as to how that whole complex works. I think a lot has to do there with what the site planning is and also the circulation patterns. We would still try and maintain screening, and then I think there would be more of a buffer planting on the street side as opposed to, the interior. Basically planting heavier along Thomas Ave, similar to what we're doing, on the project as it is right now. A suggested green space on the deck, we have not done anything there from an architectural standpoint that I know of at this date.
Thank you, Henry. What kind of height are we looking at on the retaining walls? Do we have that spec'd out anywhere?
They're relatively low, to the best of my knowledge, but
Yeah, the biggest wall we have is the rear yards of the Thomas Avenue homes, and that is 4 to 5 foot high.
Okay.
And then
So-
we're going to propose a fence to block that as well if
Fence
needed.
block it. So where the parking areas are and then the rail bed, are there going to be retaining walls? No, that one-to-one
no,
slope
these-
is going to be,
These are all berms, vegetation. The only retaining wall is really in this area.
Can I ask a clarification? You mentioned the legality of the plantings. I think that comment was in regards to, this still remains an EPOD, and in order to move any plantings after they've been planted, you actually have to come before the board to seek approval. So if you purchase that, if the applicant purchased the other property, and then you wanted to move that screening, you would actually have to apply to do that. Am I correct? Is that?
that's what we were talking about, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'd have to modify our site plan anyway, so, yeah.
But that's the only thing I think about the legality, correct?
Any other questions, Bernie?
For any of the stormwater discharge, can we use any rain gardens anywhere in the parking areas?
I'll defer to John on that.
Okay.
Previous plans, we had cisterns and things like that shown, water collection, and we can add those as needed. The problem that we had is where the low parts are is the furthest away from any of the plant materials associated with the buildings. We got to put the cisterns at the low end, but we can revisit that. It's economically feasible for this project.
Great. That would be a wonderful thing to reuse some of the runoff.
Okay, great.
So, John, are there currently any curbed and bermed areas in the parking lots that could be just turned into swales with curb cuts?
Yeah, we use the curbing a lot of times just to keep people on the pavement itself. The median that runs from Thomas Avenue, that area is a depressed area, so we are bringing water into that. So that's going to be some grasses and some large riprap. We are trying to put everything into swales that we can, so it's not a giant amount of pipe. Most of the pipe would be probably underground. So we are using the natural slope of the land that we're creating, because with the walkout basement, we're going to send everything further to the west. So I think we're doing a good job with that, and then collecting it off-site. But, curbing isn't always a sensitive issue when it comes to plowing and maintenance and things like that. So
You could
where do you
still have
stand on
that-
curbing? You want less of it or more
You
of
could
it?
still have the curbing,
Yep.
so you have that appeal of the curbing, but then you put a cut in the curbing, and that curb cut then leads to a swale instead of a berm. So your planting is below grade instead of above grade, and just helps manage more stormwater.
I understand. Yep, we can implement that. I think we are doing that on the west end, because we are kind of just letting the water sheet down into more of a grassy area. But I'll take another hard look at that. If we can do cuts in the curbing, we will.
Alan, do you have any other comments?
I just had one other comment about the sidewalks. Can they be made so they're pointing toward the runoff area as opposed to the street, so they're going toward the grass area? They're going to have some sort of a slope to them. They're not totally flat, right?
Right, so the only area that's got a sidewalk is this short run right here.
Right.
So there's very little green space associated with that, and I think we should probably put it in towards the parking lot to collect it. But I can look at that. It's because it's really just on islands, peninsulas of the parking stalls that are there.
But that's currently, we're talking also about adding some sidewalk areas.
In the future?
Conductivity.
Yeah. I guess to speak to that point about additional sidewalks, it may be maybe some striping or things like that, because adding additional 5 foot of sidewalk to our pavement section would do two things that negatively to the project. It would decrease the amount of green space for Heinrich to plant in, and also increase our impervious area ratios. And we meet code now, but adding that sidewalk. So I'm suggesting painting walking paths on the drive lanes and things like that, so people can walk through the site.
Or even trails.
Or trails, correct, yeah. But a hard surface might be a challenge throughout the site. But in the future, if we were lucky enough to move forward on a city property, I think this holistically would change. Yep.
Just real quick, and then I'm going to grab you, Richard. So going back to what Bernie was talking about before, about if we were to change some of the landscaping moving forward into the future, that we do have an EPOD, and so we have some issues there. I think it's important as you're looking at this, and it's difficult because you're looking at just the Arundequoit portion, but at the same time, you're sort of looking at the whole big picture. We want to make sure that all of your landscape plan would have the potential to ebb and flow with a grander plan, so that you wouldn't have to be making big changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can do that. We can make sure we build in the flexibility.
I want to get those, 8-foot spruces started and loving them, and then say, we got to move them 2 feet.
As site engineers, we try to do that. We don't want to design our clients into a corner. We have the most flexibility in the north side of our project. So that area, we have it's kind of a blank slate, and we can grow with that. As we talked about, having access to Marina Drive. A little challenging on the south side. We made, as I said, we took out 16 parking spots over there. We made it. This is a one-way drive lane. In the future, it might need to go to 2. So some of those changes may be flexible, may change, but we're sensitive to that. So I think we gave Heinrich some extra room, but he didn't really take it all. But there may be changes in the future because we might want two-way traffic on the south side of the building, and I think that would be our only major change.
Thank you.
Kimmy, is it all right if I add? For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mike Eveland. I sit on the Conservation Board. And one of our main kind of initiatives right now is labeling our stormwater catch basins in the town with the only rain down the drain. We use the placards, but you can get, concrete presses. You can get them put right into the, the grate tops. I'd love to see you guys kind of be a community leader in that. If you put that in there, it puts a big environmental spin on this, and it shows the other communities, these other sort of complexes, that's something that's important to us. So I just want to add that.
Thanks, Mike. Richard.
I'm good. I tend to interrupt when I have a question, so
No worries.
I'm all set.
Thank you, Heinrich.
You're welcome.
I think that's all we wanted to present tonight. We're hopeful that the town will immediately get out any requests for additional involved agencies so that the 30 days runs before the regular meeting next month. That would be great.
Yeah, we'll be communicating that, and as I mentioned before, just a clarification with the town board with respect to their potential role. And I think part of that is it might be subject based on the project design, but we can anticipate that it may be needed and have them act accordingly.
Yeah, there's no harm in including an involved agency based upon the possibility that there would be. So.
And then Carrie will also work with the city to get their consent to the town planning board being lead agency.
Correct. We'll be we're communicating to address the issues that were raised in their response letter to the original request.
Yeah, I think we identified the city, the mayor, the city council, and the director of planning and zoning.
Yeah, and we'll actually be communicating by direct letter to the mayor with carbon copies to all potential parties at the city of Rochester, just so you're aware.
Great. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Nope. All right, then I'd like to open it up to the public. So I would just want to remind you when you come up to state your name and address, and if we could try to keep our comments to about 5 minutes, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Wasser. I live at 180 Beacon View Court. I explained this project last time as a beehive, pardon me, a beehive being kicked, and the more I think of it, this is a good analogy. Developers say they'll remediate the site. I heard members of the board here say that if it's not done, it'll remain a brownfield, no cleanup. The best case scenario is no more contaminants will be released after completion of this project than are being released now. All the bees back in the hive. But while construction and groundbreaking are going on, the hive is being kicked. There are safety rules for workers in brownfields mandated by OSHA. Workers on the site must be trained in hazardous materials. This additional safety protects the workers on the site. This is good. The workers by OSHA standards, which is an 8-hour day, I repeat, an 8-hour day, must wear protection. This is also good. This is the protection worn by workers in the brownfield on an 8-hour day. Neighbors and residents aren't trained. No extra protection is given. We live here not 8 hours, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We must depend on the EPA, the DEC, and most importantly, this town board. So I ask you, would you let your child in the backyard on the swing set while in the background men are working dressed like this? Would you have guests over and host a barbecue with men on the other side of your property dressed like this? Or would you relax on your boat, men dressed like this? Now on top of this, I hear, let's reduce the setback on the building. I want to leave the hive undisturbed. I myself, I leave bees alone. I don't kick the hive, and they leave me alone. With this remediation, the property's still brownfield. Brownfield ain't going away. The problem now only remains there's a building on top of it, a building on top of the hive. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Natkis. I live at 170 Eaton Road. And I have some things that I have read about, recent things that were made of changes, and also things that were discussed here tonight. So that's, isn't there a liability if you put in a trail on that property for the people to be able to have access to? One of the people that have to have access to it right now are the people that do live on that Charlotte land. Those boat people, as you want to call them, they live there in the summertime. They have picnics there. They're there 24/7 because I live there and I walk along there. So I see that going on. On the other side, too, there's people that live in their boats during the summer months. What's going to, while you're talking, Bernie was talking about the exposure for them. Okay, you're cleaning part of it. You can't clean the part that the city owns. What about these people that are going to be there? They're not going to be wearing those suits like the last gentleman just said. Don't we have a liability to those people as well? They're not on Irondequoit soil, but still they're human beings. And don't we have, as other human beings, don't we have to carry about what's happening to them? So those are two things. Another thing was regarding the traffic report. I read in that it did not include when the bridge was actually up. Now, anybody that has ever experienced that bridge knows that it takes a lot longer than when it was the Stutson Street Bridge to go up and down. It has a lot more lag time. And that bridge in the summer is up all the time for boats, sailboats, some of the government boats that are going through there. Some of them are dredging the river. So I don't understand how this is not going to impact the traffic with that bridge being up. And also, there was no mention whatsoever in those. There was only talking about Thomas, it was talking about Pattonwood, but it's not talking about Eaton Road, which, as I said, is where I live, and it's a cut-through. Right now, people do not stop at the stop sign that's on that street. They roll through it, which is very dangerous. So to have more traffic on that road, because there's not going to be any other way for these people to get around, they're going to be coming through that road. Another thing, we were talking about that 6-foot storm pipe. Well, I have some concerns about that because while I've lived on Eaton Road, it has, during severe storms, it has actually flooded twice. Our backyards, because everything is slanted going downhill, at the back of your yard, we have, which when it rains, floods. They run parallel to Pattonwood. And this is going to continue, I'm sure, onto that property on the other side where you're talking about building. I can't see how it wouldn't be. If it's all on my side, why wouldn't it be going on the other side? It's all heading for the river. So apparently our drain pipes are not taking up the water that we're already have. And we all have sump pumps on our side of the road because our basements would flood. So I don't think anybody's taken into consideration any of those points. Then going back to that land over there, what about all the wildlife? Okay, we're talking about, well, we don't want them to eat the trees and all this stuff. Well, they do. They eat all our plants in our yards. It doesn't matter what you put, they're there and they eat them. But the deer, besides for their main problem being that there are so many of them that live in these woods around here, that you remove that, where are they going to go? Right now, in my backyard, at any given time, I can have 8 deer. You're talking about ticks, which is a big problem for children, for anybody that's out there trying to do yard work in their yard. But there's a bigger problem now that has arisen, and that's coyotes. Do you know that there are coyote dens down there? And at this time of the year, this is when they just had their little pups, and this is when they're the most dangerous. So you're not also talking about disturbing their property where they're living. These animals, where are they going to go? They're going to go on the defensive, and they're going to come after people. And I don't know if any of you, these articles have been in the paper because I'm reading them about how they're telling you to be aware of these coyotes. And there's a new kind of animal that is becoming a coyote wolf that is a mixture of the two, which God only knows what that's going to present. And then when you're talking about that less parking and that, and you want to have storefront property now, because I guess when we were talking about them having the underground garage, that was going to be too much for them to ventilate and do all this other stuff. So now they're going to have storefront because I don't know why, because if any of the other businesses around this area, on that neighborhood, have they blossomed? Look across the street. No. And the main reason is there's no parking. There's no place for these people to go. And then for these parking lots, what about the impact of the salt? That you're going to, when you have to salt those driveways so these people don't have accidents, more salt on the road. Isn't all this salt going to go into the river? Which, again, we're finding that this, in other areas, it's getting into the pipes. It's affecting the school's water. I just, I don't understand. They're asking for something that is above what the town had an ordinance for, which was 95 units. We just keep talking now, it's 125 units. The whole idea just stinks. Like he said, it's a brownfield. You're going to just cover with a couple of feet of dirt and some driveway. The problem hasn't gone away. When you're digging down to put those beams in, you're exposing that land, whatever's down there, which I would preferably like to leave undisturbed. I just don't understand why we've even gotten this far. I I thought that the town of Arundecoit was a wonderful place to live. I've lived here most of my life. And right now, I talk to my neighbors and everybody is scared stiff. And they want to get out before nobody wants cancer. People lived around Kodak. Everybody promised, oh, nothing's going to happen to you. Look at what happened to all those people. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else that would like to address the board?
Hi, I'm Roseanne Lopa. I live at 210 Totem Trail. And I've spoken before about density, and I'm in agreement that the town says 95. Let's keep it at 95. I am concerned tonight hearing that the city portion could be an additional 135 units. So that makes a density of 260 units in that area. I am a boater. I do have a dock down there. I enjoy that area. A lot of people enjoy that area. We see this beautiful drawing with the boats here, but let's see another big, huge building right in there on top of that one and see what the picture really is going to look like if they get approval from first the town board to do 135 and then the city to have additional units in there. I think the building is too high. As you come over the bridge, you're going to be looking right into those people's windows. I know you kind of grade them out, but it's going to obstruct all the view as you're coming into Arundecoit. It's always a nice, peaceful drive over that bridge, coming onto Thomas Avenue and seeing the open air. Now, I do live on Totem Trail. I have to come out onto Thomas Avenue every day. My daughter lives on Thomas Avenue, and you can't tell me by adding 260 units down there, it's not going to be dangerous. I back out of her driveway at 5 o'clock. I have to wait several times or not proceed north. I have to go south, go around the block, and then come out on Van Voorhees. So I'm very familiar with the area. I think you should think hard before you do a partial approval of 135 units when another potential of 135 units come in. Also, parking, as the lady just mentioned, they mentioned maybe 8,000 square feet under Building 1, maybe a restaurant. Where are those people going to park? Right now, for 125 units, they got a little over 200 spaces. They're counting on people in those apartments to be 2 people, up and coming people, or retirees. You and I know everyone's going to have 2 cars. So that's going to be an issue whether they believe it or not, or you're going to have to do a bus route down there. I don't know what's going to happen. But that's all I wanted to say. Thanks. Think hard before you approve it.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Charles Dietz. I live at 30 Beacon View Court. That's my house right here. I've stated before that I'm against this project, but looking at the project, it looks very nice. It really does. My major concern is the brownfield and the contamination that exists there. I'm an old guy. Our neighborhood's changing. There's young families moving in left and right. Right across the street from us, there's 4 children. 2 doors down, there's 2. The lady with the 4 kids is pregnant with another one. There's over on Smuggler's Lane, there's 3 or 4 families that have just moved in, and they all have young kids. I'm talking young, I'm talking 1, 2, 3 years old. I'm concerned with what's going to happen to them. It's probably not going to affect me. It's too late. Either I've got it or I don't. But these young families, they're the ones that are going to be affected by this. And these guys are looking to build a beautiful building, and they probably got the great idea with developing the waterfront and everything like that. But you got to worry about the families that live down there, not the old people that are going to move into this place, or the single people that are only going to be there temporarily until they find another place to move. That's my major concern with this whole thing. The second concern I have is the traffic. Now, all you people that are sitting here, I don't know where you live. I don't know how familiar you are with the town. I don't know how often you get down Thomas Avenue in the summertime. At 4 or 5 in the afternoon, even when the bridge isn't up. It's a nightmare. I do a lot of walking. I try to walk across Thomas Avenue, and there's a crosswalk there. You might as well, you're just a target. They see you coming down the hill, they just hit it. It's just going to get worse. These people that are going to try to be coming out on Thomas Avenue, they're not going to be able to turn left. Maybe they can turn right if they aren't coming off the bridge at 40 miles an hour. It's like out of a chute when they come around that corner. That's my second major concern. And the young lady that was up here talking about Eaton Road, that's like a raceway. The people go up and down that thing like it's crazy. I'm glad I don't live there. I feel sorry for those poor people, especially the people with kids. My third concern, because I live where I live, is what I'm going to look at, or what somebody's going to look at out my back door. I got to admit, I don't have the greatest view there is right now, but I really don't want to be looking at other people looking down at me. There's, with a 5-story building, or 4 stories and an underground parking, there's still an elevation that looks down on these homes. And I think in some people have pools, some people have other things in their backyard, and they expect some privacy. They've put up fences, they've done other things, but they never expected somebody looking down over them. So when I hear that the board says to the developer, have you talked to the neighbors about their concerns? I don't think they've really tried. I think they've come around and tried to ask individual people, what do you think? But I think the board should be concerned with what the neighbors think. I think they should be the ones that want to see the neighbors' concerns and what they want to look at. I realize that the brownfield is one problem, traffic's another, and the third and the biggest problem to the young people in the neighborhood is what's going to happen to them 10, 20, 15 years down the road. So if you really want to know what the neighbors think or what the neighbors would like to see from behind their houses, I have a document the neighbors drew up, and they'd be willing to share it with you. The board has never asked for it. They've never asked us what we want. They've given us the opportunity to go to these guys and say what we don't like, but you've never given us the opportunity to say what we would like. So I think you ought to consider that before you make a decision one way or the other. And I think you ought to give the neighbors the opportunity to give you something so that you can understand what we would like to see.
We'd actually welcome that if you have something to share with us tonight. We'd be
Okay.
happy to share that.
All
Thank
right,
you.
I'll give it to you after the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Narkis at 170 Eaton Road. I'm just coming up to make a comment on what that gentleman was just saying about being informed. I spoke to this gentleman here the last time after the meeting, and I said to him, why wasn't anyone on Eaton Road ever informed of any of these things that were going on? Oh, because that's not what we were, we didn't have to. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have to? We're affected deeply by what's going on. And he has made no attempts whatsoever to reach me or any of my neighbors. Thank you.
Sue McKenna, 50 Beacon View Court. Just so you know, I'm the greenhouse with the red truck right there. I just have a couple questions, just listening to everything going tonight. I do think that they've made improvements on the plan. I still have major concerns with the brownfield, living right behind it. And a lot of the discussion now with the brownfield, you're talking with the city, but I don't see anybody from the board talking to the city. I don't see a representative. I hear Carrie saying, well, we'll contact them by mail. Shouldn't there be a representative on both sides talking if the city's going to be involved in this? Instead of the applicant telling you, well, they told us this and maybe this. I mean, I think moving forward, that should be really important to do for everyone's benefit, for the town's benefit and for the residents' benefit and the applicant's benefit. So that was one thing that I had wanted to mention. The other thing, talking about the pipe, that 6-foot pipe is actually behind my house on the other side of the railroad track, and I was there when they built that. And for all this time, I thought that was a county pipe. And I may be wrong. Is that a town pipe, or is that a county pipe that ties into Thomas Avenue and on? Doesn't that go all the way over to Van Leer?
I would not want to answer that without my DPW commissioner to look at the plan, but my understanding is that our DPW commissioner has reviewed the plans, and so I would prefer to defer to.
We'll be happy to get back to
I
you.
think that might be a county, so you probably need to get in contact with them. And then the other thing, now we're talking again with the city and the possibility of maybe the city getting involved in this. What happens to this project now? The project they've presented to you now is an Arundequoit project. If a month from now the city decides, oh, well, maybe we'll go ahead with it, do they have to start all over again? I would think that would have to be, and it would be even more involvement on both sides. So.
And I can respond to that briefly. Town staff and city staff have been in communications. Carrie's talked with her counterpart at the city who handles seeker, and has also talked with the director of planning and zoning, as she indicated previously, and those dialogues will continue to take place. So there have been a series of communications, both written, telephone, and otherwise, back and forth between the city and the town.
But nothing as far as whether the city's going to decide to buy into this now.
And that's, the developer said that they haven't reached an agreement with the city yet, so from the town's perspective, we can't get involved as to whether or not the city is going to enter into an agreement with a, private entity. That's not within our purview. But we're certainly considering, as they've amended their secret documents, the cumulative impacts associated with the proposed future development. Even though right now it's not certain, they've updated their environmental documents to reflect what they believe would be the impacts of a fuller build out. So we do have those documents, and this board will be considering those.
Because I know also at one point the developer was saying they were going to start with the Arundequoit part of it, and then it'd probably be about 5 years before they got into the second part of it, but I'm not sure if that's changed at all either. And then the last thing I was wondering, when we're talking about the brownfield and remediating it, and they talk about monitors, has there been any consideration of putting monitors on the edge of the properties on Beacon View? During the construction and the remediation of the brownfield? I would think that would be something that certainly would be considered. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Peck. I live at 200 Beacon View Court, and I guess I'm a little bit confused, but you mentioned putting up fences or masonry fences along the property lines. It's going to look like a prison.
No,
But that's not why I came here. The traffic study was done in October of 2015. Thomas Avenue is a seasonal road. Anywhere from May to September, it's super busy.
I think it was done in August.
Well, you should see it now. The other thing, I hear the term brownfield, and I guess they said, well, don't worry about it. City of Rochester has a brownfield on Andrews Street. They put $3 million into it already, and they won't be complete for 3 or 4 years. And my suggestion would be, is I think your attorneys are Nixon Hargrave. They have an excellent environmental group that you just might want to take what they've done and throw it by them to see what they say. And also, I when they mentioned the brownfield was a result of the railroad putting fill down there, you got to remember for 30 years that was a boat. They stored boats for servicing, and a lot of gas leaks out of boats. And they mentioned there's a lead. The gas is one of the, although lead is in the soil, it's dependent on what quantity. And the gas that was leaking over those years could affect the whole thing in a negative way. And then If the developers decide to do it, could a stipulation be they purchase environmental liability in case something does go wrong, that there will be monies available to fix whatever is wrong? You know, it's just standard course. And the last thing is, there was a mention of some type of fund set up for compensation for some homeowners that try to sell their house. My suggestion would be it would be monies deposited in a third-party account, and also that an arbitration clause be put into it. And I have been involved in environmental liability a number of times, and I know how complicated it gets. That's pretty much all I have. Thank you.
Could I just quickly address your comment regarding traffic? We received from the applicant an updated traffic study dated May 2016. That was received by the town last Friday, and that's available in the Department of Planning and Zoning if you'd like to take a look at it. It has been revised.
Yeah. Is it somebody, I mean, it's dependent on how you ask for something to a quote consultant. It could be biased. I don't know. I've never seen those rubber things across the road last year, and I don't know how they would count. They'd have to count the cars, I guess, right?
And also, I would add, just to counter your point, the town engineer is reviewing this traffic study as well, and there'll be more questions that are asked about it as we move through this process.
Because I think it's a big issue, because where it comes out is where the road splits. I don't know. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Robert Quitt, 155 Portview Circle in the Harbor Hill townhouses. And tonight I was also asked by C.P. Maloney, the president of the Homeowners Association there, to speak on his behalf. And I guess my concerns tonight are raised by the specter of this another 135 units that might be on the city property. And also the appearance of the architecture at this point. This structure is still very high. It's higher than the townhouses, for instance, at the foot of Empire Boulevard, which to me are ugly enough. And I think two problems could be solved if they would just take one layer off of these buildings, get us back down from 135 or 125 units down to close to 95 units, and lower the the appearance of these structures. It solves two problems at one blow, as far as I can see. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board? Pardon me? You're fine. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Anna Shalia. I live at 100 Beacon View Court. I live there with my husband and my two kids. We moved to Arundecoit from downtown Rochester. We are art hipsters. We considered living in a lot of other neighborhoods in Rochester, but we drove down Beacon View Court and we knew we wanted to raise a family on that street. Luckily, other young families have made the same decision, so there's never a shortage of kids to play with. I work downtown. I'm a millennial. My husband's a little older than a millennial, and he's a prominent photographer in town. We're asking you to consider our concerns when voting on aspects of Lighthouse Point Apartments. While it's beautiful, it's very lovely. It looks like maybe it belongs in downtown Disney in Central Florida. It is just mammoth. This is not why we moved to Arundecoit. We want that tree-lined street. We want to know our neighbors. I'm able to call my neighbors and say, hey, can you check on my babysitter? She's not picking up her cell phone. This is why we moved here. Please don't ruin that. Please don't take that away. Because it's past their bedtime, on behalf of all the kids who live on Beacon View Court, who mostly are boys, I have the only little girl, so she's going to have a lot of boyfriends. we request an environmental impact statement. Now, I don't quite know what I'm talking about, but from my understanding, your board can have a positive declaration to the seeker process, and that would move forward an environmental impact statement, which would guarantee a thorough assessment of the environmental impact on this brownfield. An EIS is the only way to be certain this development will not have significant adverse environmental impacts. I ask you to consider the young families, the future of our town. Please keep us safe and healthy, and please keep us in Irondequoit. Last night around 7:30, my husband and I were working in the yard. He takes the front yard, I take the backyard. He was watering the grass, trying to get it to look as good as our neighbors, and I had the baby monitor in my pocket, and I was weeding around a fawn that was hiding in our ferns. I could hear kids riding bikes on the street and some kids playing down at the marina. I waved at a couple as they were walking their dogs down the nature path. I saw Joanne working on her garden too, a few houses down. This is our neighborhood. It is not skyscrapers. It is not this mammoth building. It's quiet and it's family oriented. Not only will Lighthouse Point Apartments dramatically alter the physical characteristic of our neighborhood, it will do a disservice to our property values potentially and to our community if it fails. When not all the apartments sell or the restaurant has a bad rating on Yelp and it goes out of business, what are we going to be left with? Look around Rochester at all of these cookie cutter things, and what are they left with? Look at Constantino's, look at Corner Bakery, look at these other new, hot, flashy establishments that millennials, we don't want. We're too cool for that. We wanted our cool retro 1970s house, which is why we moved to Beacon View. We want something that's new and family and hip. And by the way, speaking for all the other cool, hip millennials that I know I'm not that cool. They want to live downtown. The stuff that's going on downtown right now is so cool. And guess what? I'm sorry, this isn't it. This isn't it. You're not going to get the mega rich 29-year-old kid to move up to Irondequoit. Doesn't matter how good Encore Chocolates is. He wants to be downtown. He wants to be near the bars, and that's just not who we are. Let's be who we are. We are neighborhood. We are family. We are music and culture. You built this incredible library because you knew your audience. You knew your neighbors. That's who we are. If that restaurant has a bad Yelp rating and it goes out of business, what are we going to be left with? Please consider the impact of your decisions from 10, 15, 20 years from now, because I want to be a resident here 10, 15, 20 years from now. I want to kick ass at my job. I want to stay in Rochester. I don't want to leave this place. I will. I get offers other places, but I want to be here. I want to be the future of this town, and there's so many people like me. And they're not here right now because they've got kids and they've got to be up in the morning. I've got baby formula on my pants right now. I'm hoping it doesn't show up on the closed circuit television. Please think about Irondequoit. Don't be distracted by this flash. It's not worth it. I'm your future. My kiddos are your future. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to address the board? Go ahead, Alan. No one else is coming up. You can respond.
Yeah, I just briefly, I didn't frankly hear anything terribly new that we haven't heard from a lot of the same speakers in the past. But again, I'll reiterate, I've said this before, 1999, the town went through a planning process, did a generic EIS, rezoned this property, and decided that it makes sense for the community to have this sort of development in the waterfront area to rezone to the river harbor, and that's what happened. This is exactly the type of development that was contemplated nearly 20 years ago, and we feel it'd be a great development, and we do have confidence in Irondequoit and in Rochester, and that we can support this type of development. Our market study shows there's really no question about that. With respect to the brownfield, I guess maybe because this is my area, I don't really understand it, why people would be unhappy that we're going to take the contaminated property and remediate it as the DEC would require. I think that's a great thing. It's a real environmental positive. We're not going to leave the land in a state where people could be exposed. We're going to install the barrier, put the restrictions on. The work, any OSHA requirements, obviously we comply with. There would be community air monitoring as part of this, so that if there's a dust issue or whatever, we would avoid that. And if anything showed up in the monitors, we'd have to stop work and all. So that's all dealt with by the DEC. That's standard practice. We did. I worked on a very similar cleanup on the bay on Empire Boulevard. We would be doing exact sort of same thing. As to the traffic issues, the traffic study was done on August 20th and September 1st. We purposely did it at the height of the summer traffic, and done by really the top traffic engineering firm, SRF, in the area. They just reanalyzed their data, determined that this is not going to have any impact. Is there a problem when the bridge goes up right now? Yeah, there is. That's a problem. You got to deal with it. If that's one of the things about being in the community, a waterfront community with a lift bridge, that is an issue for people. You're going to have to wait when the bridge goes up. When we build our project, are people going to have to wait for when the bridge goes up? Yep, they're gonna. But that's not an impact from our project. The traffic engineers say we're not going to have any discernible impact on traffic. And we did, by the way, just get a letter from DOT, from New York State DOT, which I emailed to Ms. Ivers, and you'll have a hard copy of it that said they approved our traffic study. So with respect to the, I think there was a question about the pipe. It doesn't, Van Leer is sewage treatment. It doesn't come from Van Leer. It's a stormwater drainage that we understand is the town's pipe. So again, come back to this, a great project for Arundequite, exactly what the town board and the town asked for when it rezoned this many, many years ago. I understand maybe people don't look when they go to buy a house to see what the town has planned for the property next door, but obviously something's going to happen on the property, and it's a good thing. We're going to clean up the brownfield and make a great project. So we would ask, hopefully, I'm hoping that at the next meeting or at the workshop even, we could go through some of the environmental issues on the environmental assessment form on the part 2. I think that would be, we would really appreciate if we could spend some time on that.
I think that's reasonable. We'll have had time to review it for the workshop.
That would be great. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. So, Michelle, I also want to read in for the record that we received a correspondence from John Herbert and Kathy Anderson. Any other questions from the board? No. So at this time, the planning board received supplemental information on Friday responding to the town staff request for additional information in connection with seeker, which the planning board and staff are still in the process of reviewing. Once we have completed our review of these supplemental materials, town staff will advise the applicant whether any additional information is required for the planning board to make its determination of significance under seeker, whether all requested information has been received, and or whether any changes to the list of interested and involved agencies is required. So town staff is also working on responding to the letter received from the City of Rochester in connection with seeker in this coordination effort being led by the town. So that being said, we're really not in a position this evening to make a determination. Would you agree with that, gentlemen?
Yes.
Go to the next project. Okay. Michelle?
The next item is a Zoning Board of Appeals referral, case number PZB 1504-4. Request by Land Tech, acting as agent for Angelo Licardallo, Metal Holdings LLC, for seeker determination of significance to subdivide 63 lots and construct 62 townhouse units on premises 160 Densmore Road in an R1 residential district.
We'll give everybody a minute
To get themselves together. And just as a reminder, this was an item that's been tabled.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Okay. While this matter was on the table, we submitted some additional information. We supplemented or really redid our environmental assessment, tried to supply all the information that the town's engineers had requested. We did meet with staff and the town engineer. My understanding is there's just one issue outstanding as far as a request for information regarding some additional geotechnical work. Our position, we don't believe that the town has ever required this additional amount of information for any applicant, and there was a similar development actually the town had with the town library, and it didn't do that sort with a pond that ended up being an infiltration basin, maybe not by design, didn't require that kind of testing. This will be very expensive, at least $13,000, perhaps $17,000. We got a couple of quotes. So we would ask the board not to require that, or in the alternative, because I believe this is an unlisted action, although we did require we did submit at the board's request a full environmental assessment form. We would request that the board consider a condition neg deck, the condition being that following the zoning board consideration of the pending variance request, that we would either submit the required do the required testing, or would revise the site plan and the stormwater design so as to avoid this issue, one or the other. The point is, we don't feel that we should have to do this unprecedented testing at great expense at this juncture when we have not had the opportunity to go to the zoning board and see if they would approve our use variance application, and we have not determined the number of units. If the number of units is less, the stormwater drain is actually maybe different. But the big issue is whether we were going to be approved by the zoning board on the number of units, and our client has already gone to great expense, so that's our request.
May I comment for just a quick moment? Sure. So, and I've got Kathy Spencer here from Labella in their environmental unit, and she can certainly jump in and stop me or add to what I'm going to say in just a moment. But first, what I would like to say is that the town planning board and any other board that has to contemplate development looks at each site individually. So the idea of precedence in terms of testing really is based on the conditions present on a given site. And in this particular case, we've got some steep slopes and woodlots to contend with and E-pods. So the environmental challenges and or the analysis or testing that's required here is specific to this site. It's also specific to, and the point you just made, to the development that's being proposed. If the development were different or smaller or something else, the configuration of the design of stormwater management and drainage would be different as well. So what we're suggesting here, and I say we, engineer, and I'll certainly let Kathy speak to this directly, is that given the current design, we don't have the sufficient information needed to determine that there wouldn't be significant adverse impacts associated with the design without the testing. And so we're sort of at that point where we can't we can't say that there'll be small or no impacts associated with that design because we don't have information to support that claim or that determination for that particular aspect of the design, not talking about anything else that might be looked at as far as the seeker goes. So, Kathy, would you like to add anything to that? No pressure, but if I've said it adequately.
I think you've said most everything I would say, Carrie, and I think, in response to Alan's point, you have to do seeker in accordance with the regulations and standards set for seeker. And we can't do the hard look and decide if there's potentially a significant adverse impact without the information to decide if there's a significant adverse impact. I don't think that's any surprise. We asked for the information. We've moved along very quickly on this and have been very responsive. And we asked for the information, and it didn't show up. So I don't think it's any surprise that we don't have the information that we don't have.
I need the remedial lesson. What information are we talking about?
Basically, one of the bigger impacts that we are concerned with, so I'm an environmental scientist. I don't claim to be an engineer. I'm not an engineer. When I am confronted with issues such as this drainage pond, I go to Mike Shaffron, who I think you all know is your town engineer with Labella. And I say, Mike, is this design going to prevent impacts to the slope? With your engineering analysis, let me know, because I need to know if we have drainage or slope stability issues. Mike has not been able to give me a definitive, no, I think I looked at this and it's really going to be okay. I can't get that out of him. He won't say it. So I'm not going to, I don't feel comfortable as an environmental professional writing up an analysis to present to the planning board for your consideration that I don't feel confident in the understanding of the issue. So basically, it all revolves around the design of the infiltration pond, and whether we don't have soil information to know that it will all infiltrate completely down and not hit a layer and shoot out the side onto the slope. They did redesign the pond about a week ago. They took away 15 feet of the treed buffer in about a third of the area, and I didn't, that was part of our analysis of character and visual impacts. Half of that, or whatever percent, is gone now. I need to be able to give you an analysis of the final design, and the design isn't final in my mind because we don't have a workable design. The site, they're trying to do a lot with the site. They're not trying to put a lot in there. And so, in other sites, we sometimes are able to, work together, and there's a little bit of wiggle room because there's more room on the site. There's just not room on the site to wiggle in this case.
Thank you.
If I could just address a couple of issues. One is we're not before you with site plan review, so we only have a concept plan. So obviously there'll be some changes. We did, in order to have both a nature trail, it would double for pond maintenance. At the far east portion of the site, where the pond would be, we're suggesting instead of a 30-foot buffer, would only be in a limited area. We would have the trail go through to limit that to 15 feet. But in that area, there's nothing to buffer because there's no townhouses or anything. It's just a pond and the natural surroundings. So we didn't see how that we thought that was actually a benefit because you would have the nature trail. So there's no real need for a buffer there. As far as the design, again, what we're asking for is, I understand Labella's concern, and what we're asking is that so we can move forward with the zoning board, that the board consider making a condition neg deck, or at least, I understand you got to go through the part two on the other, and we did submit a lot of stuff. We sat down and there was a lot of issues. We submitted this, we had all kinds of studies. We did submit a lot of stuff. We're down to one issue. So I want the board to be clear that we did respond to everything but one issue. And it's mainly because of cost. So what we're asking is that the board consider going through the review, and if there's one issue the board finds is a necessary issue, make a condition, NAGDAC, which you can do with an unlisted action. I think it requires like a 30-day notice period, and the condition being that we would do the necessary geotech or whatever borings, and determine if we determine that it is sufficient, we would go forward with that design. If it was not, we would change the design when we come in front of you for the site plan. But we really feel it's a site plan issue, and it can be put off to site plan. So I guess we'd like the sense of the board before going through the whole part two, item by item, which will take a long time, as to if the board would entertain that, so that we could move forward in front of the zoning board and see what our density would be for the project. Because depending upon what the zoning board does, the project could be quite different.
So I'm open to discussion, but I'm going to suggest to my colleagues on the board that we might want to talk about this at our workshop in lieu of making a decision tonight.
I think it's a good idea. I'm a little bit more understanding. So all these geotechnical reports that were provided did not address this issue.
Right. Apparently the geotechnical issues we did addressed where the angle of repose, I learned a little bit of this myself. The angle of repose was basically the area where it was no longer stable, so that we were set back so that we determined where we could build the units safely and not jeopardize the steep slope. But then an issue came up as to the pond location, because we need a pond, for the stormwater requirements and all. My understanding is, even though we're in the safe area, because it's an infiltration basin, so the water will seep. It's designed because this is sandy soils, so I guess it's advantageous to do your stormwater system in this way. It would infiltrate through the sand, and the concern is, will that undermine the slope? Would that cause a problem? I hope I'm explaining this right. This is my understanding. Will that jeopardize the slope? And that's the question. And I think what they want is some additional work to determine, the various layers of soil and how that would possibly, whether the water infiltrating through could possibly jeopardize the slope. So that's the concern. So we would have to go, and we got a couple bids. Like I said, one was $13,000, one was $17,000, and if we go forward with the project, we're willing to do that, and not, and if we believe that it's going to show that this is a safe location, but we understand the town engineer's concern, so we'd be willing to do it at that juncture, but so we're asking for that condition, and if it didn't turn out, that when we came to you with the site plan, we'd have to adjust the site plan with a different stormwater configuration that could well end up with us losing some units, frankly, because we'd have to move the stormwater basin, or however we did it, would have to be adjusted. So that's where we're at.
So I'm saying I'm willing to entertain a conversation and discussion at our workshop, but I'm not feeling confident that we would want to make that move tonight. But I'm open to suggestions.
I think it's a good idea.
My questions as I was going through the materials had to do with the stormwater issue. As I'm going through, most of the other questions that you guys were asked and answered were pretty much self-explanatory. And the movement of the pond also concerned me because it was on one location and then we got moved to another.
Maybe John could explain.
But I think I'm not an engineer, and I would like to hear from the folks that actually are much smarter than I am, so I can make a better judgment.
Well, I'm definitely not smarter than you, so.
At least, but maybe in his particular area
Right.
of study.
Yeah.
But I can try to explain what's transpired with the pond.
It's okay.
So the critical issue of this whole project has been the slope, and the top of the slope and what impacts of that, not only the pond, but the buildings. So in years past, and the practice of this board has always been trying to figure out that transition zone and angle of repose, and I've done 20 projects in the town of Arundecoit, and we've played with that for years, and we've all done that. And then this project was the same way. Where's that transition zone? We met with staff, and we were assigned that task. In doing that, we also went pretty far through our plans. I mean, these are concept plans, but these are really tight plans. So we had to do our storm design. So we went through our full storm design, and that involved soil testing. So not only will we do soil testing at the top, we did soil testing 12, 14 feet down to see how the soil perked. And it's all sand, so it perked very well. So the design rates that we have to design to the numbers were unbelievable. So we the water just goes quickly through the ground, which is conversely to a lot of areas where you have to do, so the ponds get bigger. So we had a very small pond. Town engineer said, well, geez, that's surprising. Are you sure about that data? I'm like, yeah, we did it ourselves and analyzed it. So we put a factor of safety in it by 2. So the pond still is, that pond we show you today is designed with a safety factor of 2 for the water quality volume of that. But the water still has to go somewhere. There's still a pipe that goes to the top of the slope. So at a 100-year storm, there's going to be some water that goes off the top of this slope and then drains down to Densmore Creek. Those are all our factors of that we're looking at, design elements. So we design elements to riprap that outlet pipe. But the recent plan, we said, okay, let's shift everything further away from the top of the slope. Let's try to get it further away. So we made our pond more linear, so it goes more east-west, and we pushed it into that buffer. As Alan said, yeah, we did take 15 foot of that buffer out, but you're looking at now a pond. So there's no buildings or anything like that. So we pushed it further away from that design element of the top of slope. But I think Alan did a very good job explaining to you the issue that's at hand, which is what happens when that water goes through the pond and down into the soil. And the town engineer asked us to find what is that layer of soil where it meets something, bedrock or clay, and then moves laterally out towards Densmore Creek. And we worked very closely with him and came up with a very reasonable approach. He says, I just want this one test. We're like, beautiful. Call up Angelo. Angelo, we're going to do this one test. It was great. Happy day. Well, came out to that test at $17,000. So, as Alan has said, we're just hoping to get by the secret process to go to the zoning board, because that's truly why we're here. We're in front of you for a determination of, hey, does this work? Because the zoning board has no clue. They rely on the planning board. We're asking the zoning board for density. So we'd really like to get by this board, only to go to the zoning board to say, no, this number of units doesn't work, or cut it down to this, and then we got to come back to you. So at the end, what Alan's saying is we really want to come back to you, and if we come back to you, we'll pay the money. But the seeker issue has blown up to such an issue we can't move forward. The plans are not final. We still have to get back to the zoning board, which is really why we're here tonight. So that's what we're looking for some relief for. Let us get back to zoning board. And we've done contingent approvals before at the planning board, never at the seeker level, but contingent final with doing some minor change. So my client is committed. I'll say it. He'll say it too, that he's willing to pay for that test, but at the appropriate time. And we feel that right now it's not appropriate because it becomes cost prohibitive, and we still have the zoning board to go to, and then we'll come back. So I went a little bit more than your engineering question about the pond, but you gave me a window.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. And I think I may have misstated that actually the pond does go into the 30 feet, not just the. I thought the nature trail. I guess I misunderstood, John.
Reduced to the buffer.
But as you can see, there's really nothing to buffer there. The point of the 30 feet here is a screen for the houses, but over here, you're just looking off the cliff, basically.
And we'd be willing to convert that buffer to a fence. You know, there's other elements that we can do.
Right. So.
Any thoughts, Richard?
Plenty. I certainly understand the position of the applicant, and I'm not prepared at this point to say we're going to require the testing prior to, in my opinion, prior to any consideration. So I do agree with your idea to move it to the workshop so we can talk more. At the same time, I have two concerns. One, the timing of it and how long this has been an issue, and now we're hearing about it for the very first time. But secondly, I'm not prepared to overrule our town engineer and their recommendations. So I really would like the opportunity to vet it out more in a workshop scenario. I don't want to make a decision at this point. I understand both sides of the argument, but I think, we could possibly meet and try to find some sort of compromise.
I agree.
And just from a timing standpoint, if I could just interject to let you know that the revised grading and drainage plan was provided to the town on May 13th. That was a Friday. It came in late in the day. Our town engineer reached out and they tried to connect with the applicant's engineer so they could talk about the revised plan. Unfortunately, it took some time of back and forth reaching out, and that conversation took place as of last Thursday. So we're moving as quickly as we can as information's coming in, and recognizing that we're trying to be as responsive as a town and as a town engineer to get the information to the board and to make sure that we provide the analysis that the board needs to be able to move forward. We're trying to move as quickly as we can.
I would also note that the questions that are still highlighted on your Part 3 text, those are from March. I mean, we asked them, and I keep carrying them forward. So their plan came in Friday, May 13th, but those questions have been hanging around for a couple months. So I second what Carrie said, that we're not trying to obstruct the project. We're just trying to get an answer that we've been asking for so that we can complete seeker to the level it's supposed to be done.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought we did respond to all the questions other than this one, but if there's other questions we haven't responded to, maybe you could.
No, I'm saying that the question on the drainage, the 2 bullet points about the pond being too close to the crest of the hill and where's the water going to come out, they've been on the table for months. It's not like they just came up 2 weeks ago. And then every time we get an answer, it raises new questions.
Right.
Like the 15-foot buffer. And of course, there's ways to work around that. But I'm saying every answer is not a snap, oh, we're done. It always seems to raise new questions.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, we responded to things. This issue was, I thought, relatively recent from like March. It wasn't an issue that was raised. There were some questions raised last fall, and we took quite a while to respond. But I thought this was fairly just in the last 2 months, so we had a lot of work to do. We did come up with, totally redid this, and this was the one issue we put out, for proposals and went back and forth, and this is one issue that is still open. Mr. Licciardello would like to say something to the board.
Hi, my name's Angelo Licciardello, and some of the faces are new. And I see that Peter's not here. But I've been coming back and forth for almost 2 years now. I've been to probably 5 or 6 workshop meetings. And all I'm looking for is seeker. I'm not even looking for a final site plan approval yet. I don't even know if the zoning board's going to approve this. And in all my years of developing, this is the first time that I've ever been asked to go in and do a side bore on a pond. I've never heard of it before. I went in there, she'll tell you, I went in there, back a few months, and I did testing that the town required. I went in there with the smallest piece of equipment that I had, which was a little backhoe, so I wouldn't knock as many trees down. And she'll tell you, neighbors called the police, they called the town, they called everybody, because a few trees got knocked down. For me to go in and do this testing that they're asking for, I mean, you gotta go in there with a big drilling rig to test the side of a pond. Now, I went in there with a backhoe, I dug as far down as the backhoe would dig, about 12 feet, 10 to 12 feet. It's all sand. There's nowhere for the water to go but straight down. It's not gonna go anywhere else. It's like the beach. It's like being on Ontario Beach. It's all sand. So this test is ridiculous, if you ask me. It's just another thing to just make me spend more money, which, if you guys want me to spend more money, fine. But if you ask me to do it now and I spend this, I might as well just open the window and throw it out the window, because the zoning board might say, no, we're not going to give you the variance. Then where do I go from there? I mean, you guys have the authority to final say when I come back with the final plan to say, we want this test. We want to make sure that the pond's going to work, or we're not going to give you final approval. You can do that at a later time. There's no need for it to be done now. Right now, I'm just looking for seeker. I mean, it's simple. It really is. It's simple. I'm only building 62 little townhomes. I mean, how much of an impact can that have on the environment? All I'm asking is, please, can you please let me get to the next step? We're in front of the zoning board. I believe it's next month. We have an application in front of the zoning board. I can't go there unless I have a seeker determination. And I'm asking you, please, can you give me a seeker determination, a negative seeker determination, so I can make it to the zoning board, so I can see what they have to say? And then when I come back, if you guys want me to do this test, I'll go in there, I'll knock some more trees down, and we'll get the rig in there, and we'll do some side tests. Whatever you guys want, make you happy. But right now, what you're asking just isn't right, because I might spend this money, get to the zoning board, and they might say no. And then I'm back to square one again. So, please, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And we certainly, as Mr. Pluka said, don't want to be obstructionists. We're not trying to stand in the way of progress, but we have certain formalities and procedures that we have to follow as well. So that being said, I'm going to go back to my first comment that I think this is something that we should discuss at the, I don't, does anybody want to make another comment? I just think we need to have some more discussion. I don't think we're prepared this evening to make a decision.
I agree with you.
Do we need a motion?
You can keep it on the table. You can
Okay.
do a motion to keep it on the table.
All right.
I'd like to move that we keep the seeker question open until we have the answer to the engineer's question.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Do we have a motion to we don't have anything else we have to do? All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Any seconds?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Wow. Anybody opposed? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.